Hello, and welcome to the Less is More Education podcast with your host, Steve Flores, where I review the research that is most relevant to pedagogy and education policy to help teachers with their ongoing learning. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to keep the podcast going. You can find and reach me on Instagram and YouTube at lessismore.education and on Patreon at patreon.com/lessismoreeducation. And today I rethink education. And I did a lot of research in preparation to kind of put it in terms of rethinking education, knowing all that we know about automation. And I'm going to look at three aspects of automation. They're going to be robotics, they're going to be machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and kind of see what kind of a future does that paint for our future students. Ultimately, what I'd like to do is to rethink education in terms of possibly creating my own school. Like, what would I need for that? And I'm going to start off with a story about Stephen. And Stephen is not their real name, but Stephen was a student that I saw in my classroom, and he had a hard time focusing. So what he would do is he would play on his phone, or I'd see him playing on his phone. I didn't have a cell phone policy because I wanted to encourage, a sense of autonomy in my students. And I would ask him, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I'm just taking a 5-minute break." The problem was sometimes a 5-minute break would last for the whole period. And a lot of the time, I would just ask my students a question about their cell phones and usage, and that would usually guide them towards, making better decisions, but not Stephen. But the types of questions that I would ask my students is, would the future you thank the right now you right now, like while you're using your phone? Or how's your cell phone making you feel right now? That's a really important one. Or do you think you're setting a good example right now? Like, so if your little brother or little sister were here, would you want them to see this? And that really gets most people thinking about, what is it that I'm doing? Is this making me happier? Maybe less happy? What's going on in my own life? And they can make better decisions, but not Stephen. Stephen was just all out, and 5-minute breaks. I'm like, "Oh, you taking another 5-minute break?" Yeah, taking another 5-minute break. Now, one time I asked him, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I have to be." And that is a common answer to that question. I just have to be. I don't have a choice. And to many of my students, I'm going to say most of my students, that's their answer, is I have to be. There's a smaller cohort that says, "Oh, I want to be here," or "I'm interested in physics," or maybe chemistry. But most of them go, "I have to be here." Well, the question then is, well, why do they have to be there? And the answer is graduation requirements and A through G requirements. So the reason why most of my students were in my chemistry class is because it satisfied both A through G and graduation requirements. So if you don't know what an A through G requirement is, it's the requirements necessary to be the minimum requirements necessary to be accepted into a Cal State or University of California here in the state of California. And for most schools, their graduation requirements and their A through G requirements are pretty much the same. And that tells you what the focus is. The focus of education is to get most of our students into college. And there's some good reason for that. For the most part, if people go to college and get a bachelor's degree, over the course of their lifetime, they tend to make more money than those that do not. Now, there's a lot of changes that are happening in the world that are, so that data might not necessarily be true still. And I'm going to go into that into a future episode. But right now, I wanted to know, okay, well, what if I wanted to rethink schools, right? And maybe even possibly create my own school. What do I need to know? What do I need to prepare for? What are the things that these students need to know? So first, before I can do that, I have to look at what the future of the workforce is going to be. I can't make any predictions or I can't prepare my students if I don't know the world that they're going to be going into. And secondly, I also want to know, like, well, what is the role for colleges and universities? I'm not saying that there is no role for them, and I think there probably is, and I'm going to go deeper into that data, right? And right now, it seems to me that if you are going to college to get to become a doctor, maybe to become a lawyer, or to have some kind of advancement in your degrees, like you want to get a PhD in something, whether it's writing or sociology or whatever, then yeah, college seems pretty worth it to me. However, if you're going to college because everyone told you to do so, that might not be a good idea. And we're going to take a look at some reasons why today. So this is going to be part one of this series. And I'm going to look at what's the future going to look like and what does that mean for our students or for education as a whole. All right. So the first question that I wanted to know or answer was like, what is automation and what types of industries is that going to start to affect? Now, automation has been around in the United States since the 60s and 70s, and that's where like the first robots started to kind of come in, and then they really got implemented in like the 80s and 90s. And so I wanted to see, all right, well, what's the data on this? So I found a paper that was called Robots and Jobs, Evidence from U.S. Labor Markets. And in this paper, done by Darren I'm probably going to mess up his name, I'm going to say Esimoglu and Pasquale Restrepo, basically summarize the effects that robots have had on the workforce. And first off, robots have been in industry for a while, but between the years of 1993 and 2007, they found that the amount of robots that we were using in the United States quadrupled. And so that's in the United States and Western Europe. And so where are those robots? They write, the automotive industry employs, as of 2020, 38% of all existing robots, followed by the electronics industry, which is 15%, plastics and chemicals, which is 10%, and metal products, which is 7%. So most of these fall into the category of manufacturing. So although one of the other things that they took a look at is what are the effects on wages and employment? And they decided to take a look at it from the perspective of, all right, if we introduce one robot, how many robots or how many people or workers is that going to displace? And what they found was that it's not that cut and dry. The addition of a robot into a factory or industry has both positive and negative effects on employment and wages. So the part that most people focus on is if you have like a welder who would weld a part onto like a car, right? Well, we can replace that welder with a machine. Machine's going to be way more accurate. They're going to be faster, and they're going to be like cheaper because you don't have to pay for their health care. You don't have to pay them an hourly wage. You just have to pay for somebody to maintain them. And that is a lot cheaper than having a worker. Now, it's not that cut and dry. Because your productivity goes up, now you're making more cars per hour. Later on, downstream effects are going to cause more people needing to be hired because they need to like take those cars to where they need to be. Now you're going to need more salespeople. Now you're going to need more like support staff to kind of organize how all these are going to go or all these cars are going to go. And so it's not like you just lose a worker and then that's the end of the story. You might gain more workers later on. And they took a look at a bunch of different industries. And what they found was that ultimately it did have a negative effect. So one robot would replace about 6 workers, but then it would wind up hiring about 3 more later on. So I think the average was 3.3 robots that I have here, or 3.3 workers per robot. So for every one robot that gets implemented, you lose about 3.3 workers. And then it also had an overall negative effect on wages, because now, you have fewer people that are working. So now there's less wages that are going on. And even though there were robots are mainly in manufacturing for assembly, there was also negative effects later on when it came to construction, retail, and personal services. However, there was some evidence that in certain industries, you actually wind up hiring more people, but that evidence wasn't that strong. And those industries focused around agriculture, education, healthcare. In education, you can kind of think about it like, you create a robot that, you just create like a general purpose robot. And you'll need to hire more educators who understand how that works and who can teach other people how that works. I'm going to say bless you to my dog right there because she's sneezing out in the middle of recording, which is funny. And so it's not so cut and dry as to like robots are just replacing one person or three people, or there are some positive effects and there are some negative effects. All right, so who are robots affecting? That's the other question. And so what we can do, what the researchers looked at, Asimoglu and Restrepo, is they try to find who it affects by education level. So you can think of people as existing along education groups, and you can think of them as having less than a high school education, having a high school degree, some college, having a college degree, or having a professional degree, having a master's, or having a PhD. And what they found was that robots had a negative effect on everyone from college and professional degrees down. And they all experienced some negative employment and wage effects. So they weren't being hired as much, or they weren't getting paid as much. And those with a master's or doctoral degrees, you would think, then they probably have like a wage increase due to these robots. And they found, nope, that wasn't the case. And that has to do with like exposure. So even though people that have higher degrees have like masters and PhDs, they aren't really interacting directly with robots as much as all the other people that come down the line are as well. And they write, one interpretation is that this result reflects from reduced demand for workers from the non-tradable sector. A complementary explanation is that in contrast to other computer-assisted technologies, industrial robots are not directly complementing high-skill workers. So basically, they aren't really interacting with one another, so they're not really causing any kind of an effect either way. So even though robots have been implemented for a while now, what they found was that the adoption cost, so how many jobs did we lose in total, between 93 and 2000 due to robots, accounted to about 400,000 jobs, which is pretty significant if you think about like how many people there are in the US. That's like that's a percentage at least right there. But robots aren't the only disruptive technology that exists out there that are being implemented more and more as time goes on. There's also what we can call machine learning and artificial intelligence. So machine learning, ML, artificial intelligence, AI. So most people understand AI, but if you see ML, that usually means they're talking about machine learning, which is a little bit different. Although some people categorize machine learning as like a subset of the umbrella term artificial intelligence or AI. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at machine learning and artificial intelligence because those are going to have more significant effects on the workforce. Now, unlike robots, it's pretty clear what you can use them for, right? If you have somebody that's doing a repetitive job and it's physical and you can automate it, you can replace that person with a robot and they can do the job. Now, machine learning and artificial intelligence, those can be a little bit more pervasive because they are computer programs. So anywhere where computers exist or are being used can be affected by machine learning and artificial intelligence. So that's why it's pretty important. So what I'm going to look at first is machine learning. And a lot of my information comes from a paper called actually it's an article in Science Magazine called "What Can Machine Learning Do? Workforce Implications." In this paper, we have two researchers. One of them, I'm gonna mess up his name. His name's Eric Bernjolfsson, and Tom Mitchell describe machine learning as a general purpose technology. So some of you guys have heard the term Chat GPT. GPT just stands for general purpose technology, right? So there's like a little insider information there. And so what is this? This is machine learning is just basically a computer program in which you can give it a large data set, and the computer can take that data set and can identify like patterns within the data sets, so that if you input something new into it, it can spit out a very specific outcome out at the end. So you're almost like training robots or training these machines, these computer programs, to learn certain things, and they're very specific things. So as an example, this is really used a lot in the medical industry. And so one example is doctors were having kind of trouble identifying the difference between like what's a mole and what's a melanoma. So for like skin cancer. And so, it's hard to tell. Sometimes doctors get that wrong. So what they did is they gave a machine a large data set of moles, and because we already had the medical records, we could identify which moles later on became melanomas and which ones did not. And once you gave this machine all this data and information, what they were able to do is, if you gave it another picture of something that you're not sure, is this a mole or is this a melanoma, then, so is this a mole or is this skin cancer? Then the robot would look at it and it would be able to identify, yes, this is going to turn into skin cancer, or no, it's not going to turn into skin cancer. It's not going to turn into a melanoma, or it's not a case of melanoma. And what they found was these machines were so good at it that they were better than doctors at identifying the difference between the two, even doctors with a lot of experience. And so that's a significant way in which machines can kind of help us or identify or have some kind of really deep and meaningful use that is going to affect the future workforce. Because now, when you have some very narrow task, right? What is this? Is this A or is this B? You can train a machine to be able to identify that. And that's going to have significant impacts on the workforce, which we will see. So what kind of tasks? So this paper is kind of oriented around tasks. What tasks are suitable for machines or for machine learning, and what are not? And I'm going to read you this list, and you're going to start to see or get an idea as to what skills are our students in the future going to need to be successful. So, what skills are suitable for machine learning? Number one, learning a function that maps well-defined inputs into well-defined outputs. Number two, large digital data sets exist or can be created containing input-output pairs. Number three, the task provides clear feedback with clearly definable goals and metrics. 4, no long chains of logic or reasoning that depend on diverse background knowledge or common sense. Number 5, no need for detailed explanation on how the design was made. Number 6, phenomena or function being learned should not change rapidly over time. And number 7, no specialized dexterity, physical skills, or mobility required. And now, while you're looking at or listening to this, you're going to notice that the big difference between machine learning and robots is that machine learning can now start to affect white-collar jobs, whereas robots tended to affect more blue-collar jobs. And that is going to be really important because a lot of the people that have these white-collar jobs are college educated. And that's why I want to know, like, Right. Where is college still important and where isn't it? And where won't it in the future? Having this one size fits all approach and having one data set that you're looking at, you're just saying, oh, well, over the long run, people with a bachelor's degree make more than people with just a high school degree. Well, first, that's a false choice. You're comparing like two extremes. And secondly, there's an in between somewhere in there, all right, called vocational schools and special certifications. And so that's like a false binary that we're selling to students. Now, when you're looking at this list of suitable tasks for machine learning, it's pretty clear that that you're going to need people that can identify the questions necessary for these machines to understand or in order to operate, right? So a machine can't just act out on its own, right? Or this machine learning programs can't act on its own. You have to tell it what to do. So you're going to need people that can go from processing a lot of data, which is no longer going to be necessary, to identifying what are the goals and objectives that need to be accomplished for this machine, right? I'm going to set up a question. The machine is going to answer it. But I need to be good at asking questions. That's another way of thinking about it. And so this sentiment, or the other thing is that machines are not really good in the physical world. And the authors kind of echo this when they write, this has been a key reason that labor demand has fallen for jobs in the middle skill and wage spectrum, like clerks and factory workers, whereas demand at the bottom, janitor or home health aide, and top, physicians, has held up in most advanced countries. So what they're basically talking about is as we add more and more robots, then it's the people that are in the middle income that are going to be suffering the most, because a lot of their jobs are just like these really clearly defined, task-specific, repetitive jobs. And those are all going to go away. Now, people that are at the bottom, janitors and or I guess we call them custodians now, are going to be more or less safe. Again, that's a physical job and it's not super repetitive. And people that are at the very top are also going to be safe. So people that are professionals, people that have their PhDs, people that have that are doctors. And so there's going to be a dichotomy. And this dichotomy, I kind of start seeing over and over and over again. And you'll see it again when I start to go over artificial intelligence, like now. So what is artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence is machine learning, but with a little bit of autonomy. And that is now we're going to see like some really profound effects on the future workforce. So let's go into like what is an artificial intelligence. So the OECD defines artificial intelligence as a machine-based system that is capable of influencing the environment by producing an output. So predictions, recommendations, or decisions for a given set of objectives. It uses a machine or human-based data and inputs to 1, perceive real and or virtual environments. 2, abstract these perceptions into models through analysis in an automated manner, for example, with machine learning, or manually. And 3, use model inference to formulate options for outcomes. AI systems are designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy. So now we have AI, and AI kind of uses this machine learning to extend into more of an automated type task. So now you can take these repetitive tasks and you can have a machine do them and kind of adjust a little bit with time. And so I found this other actual report that was you can find on whitehouse.gov. So it's issued out by the White House, called "The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on the Future of Workforces in the European Union and United States of America." And this was also echoing the same sentiment of, look, people that are in the middle are going to be losing their jobs. People at the bottom, at the very top of both education and wealth are pretty much going to stay where they're at. And so people in the middle are either going to move up or they're going to move down. And we need to understand how that happens, right? Or why that's happening and what we can do about it so that we can, prepare our students for the future. So it's really important to think about these things. All right. So when they looked at AI, they first take a look at, all right, well, where's AI being used right now? And what they found was right now, AI is implemented in your everyday lives, although you may not know it. AI can give you music recommendations. It can automatically translate web pages. It can create personalized ads. Those are the things that it's being used for right now. Now, AI is also kind of interesting because it can create novel outputs. So things that people have not created in the past. So if you look at AI programs such as ChatGPT, you can have a conversation with ChatGPT. You can ask it questions and it can give you pretty accurate answers in return. So that's something that's different from machine learning because you can give it a variety of inputs and it'll create a variety of outputs. And then you can also look at, it's not just in conversations. There is another program called DALL-E, DALL-E, and that can create novel images. You can literally just type in, I want to see Yoda wearing a sombrero, and it will spit out 4 images with Yoda wearing a sombrero. And it can do it to like a really high degree. It looks pretty good. And you can try it yourself. You just Google DALL-E and you can start playing with it. So because AI can generate more and more like novel and creative products than machine learning alone, AI has the potential to displace a lot of workers with more advanced degrees. So we're talking about people that have college degrees and above. So there's still a question as to whether or when this will happen, and how quickly it'll happen. Now, technology is kind of scary because it evolves at a exponential level, right? And because so many things are changing at exponential levels, I feel like it's going to be quite significant for the future, and it makes the future really hard to predict as well, right? But there are some general trends that we can see. So currently, like how many firms are using AI? Like not as many as you would think. Information technology, professional services, and management are the sectors that have the greatest adoption of AI currently in their systems, and those adoption rates lie at around 5% of each of those industries. So even though it's a small percentage, it still has the potential to affect a bunch of people, especially if these firms are really big, like Facebook or like Google or like Spotify, right? So even though it doesn't take very many firms to adopt them in order for them to start to affect everyone. All right, so what are the impacts, right, of all this automation? Now, we have seen that robots can displace workers that do like really repetitive, unchanging tasks. But their impacts are still kind of low. Machine learning and AI have the potential to displace not just blue-collar workers, but white-collar workers too. So a lot of office jobs are going to start to disappear. And according to that White House report that I mentioned before, it says that AI has the potential to increase productivity, create new jobs, and raise living standards. However, by its very nature of performing non-routine tasks formerly thought to be strictly the domain of humans, AI is likely to disrupt large swaths of jobs and tasks. This may lead to difficult adjustments for workers as jobs are redesigned or require skills change. And so this is going to be really impactful to people because one of the questions that I feel like we haven't asked is, what if people can't adapt quickly enough, right? Yes, we're going to have to learn new skills because these like machine programs are going to be displacing a lot of people. But how quickly can you learn a new skill? And not only that, but how quickly can you learn a new skill that will still be relevant in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years? That's going to become the big question. And that's going to be really hard to predict. So both robots and AI will affect tasks that have like routine tasks, or industries that have a lot of routine tasks. That's things that we're doing over and over and over again, mostly through displacements. But we've also come to see that these tasks are going to be focused in middle paid occupations. So things like machine operators and office clerks are being displaced currently, and that's going to happen pretty quickly from here on out, because those are very routine jobs. In contrast, non-routine occupations are concentrated at high and low paid occupations. This phenomenon is what we call wage polarization. So as the middle jobs disappear, that just leaves really high paying and really low paying jobs. And as automation gets rid of more and more of those middle jobs, you start to have more and more people at the very top and at the bottom. So the income gap that we have between wealthy people and poor people is just going to get, or has the potential to get, way, way worse with the implementation of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So this is kind of scary, right? So it doesn't have to. There is another possible way of getting out of that, but we'll see, right? We'll see, because we don't know how this is going to play out. In fact, the White House report kind of offers like a different, like, possible take on this. They write, all right, like, let's say, what if wage polarization doesn't happen? They write, an emerging body of research suggests that AI can outperform workers in an increasing set of complex tasks, mainly done by educated workers. Compared with earlier digital innovations, this suggests a paradigm shift in our thinking about AI's potential to automate worker tasks. For example, the automation of a worker task by AI could exasperate the process of occupational de-skilling instead of job polarization. So what this basically means is, you might have a job, and your job is going to be a combination of routine tasks and non-routine tasks. Now, when an AI comes in and starts to replace you in all of those routine tasks, what that means is you as a worker no longer have to know that stuff, right? Or do those repetitive tasks. A machine can just do it. So you as a worker might potentially keep your job, because there's still all these other aspects of your job that are non-routine that are going to make it worthwhile for you to still be kept around. And that's the optimistic view that's coming from the White House. All right. And is that going to happen? Is that not going to happen? Who knows? Only the future can tell. But one thing that's going to be important is, if your job requires routine and non-routine tasks, no matter what, you're going to need to know how to think on your feet. You're going to need to know or have a lot of critical thinking skills. So this is going to be pretty intense. So what can the education system learn from all of this, right? That's the other big thing. Now, our public education system, it has a really hard job of adjusting course according to the needs of the students. And the reason is, it's a big machine itself, right? So you can think of our modern education system as being like the Titanic. And what we're seeing with AI and automation is this giant iceberg coming at public education. And my fear is that it won't be able to pivot in time in order to serve our students. So what are the things that we need to learn? And so there isn't a whole lot of good data on which skills students today need to learn, but there was this study that was done in Germany that was entitled "How Do Workers Adjust When Firms Adopt New Technologies?" And this was interesting because what they did in Germany is they took a look at these industries or these places where they adopted new technologies, and then they compared them to places or firms that did not adopt new technologies. And this is what they found. They found that workers with vocational training benefit more than workers with a college degree. One explanation might be that AI augments vocational workers more than it augments tasks done by college workers. Another explanation is that Germany's traditionally strong vocational training system, in which 76% of all workers in the sample completed vocational education, provides an abundance of specialized skills that direct systems are designed to operate with kind of mix these papers up, the skills that direct the development and adoption of AI toward making use and thereby augmenting vocational skills. So what they were finding is that when AI gets introduced into a firm, it's actually people that have vocational skills that benefit the most because they are trained in a variety of a bunch of different skills. Whereas people that have college degrees, they are very specified degrees, right? You're focusing on this one thing. And if that includes a bunch of routine tasks, then they can just be replaced. But people with vocational skills, now they are a little bit more adaptive. And so this is probably like one of the biggest arguments against this college or bus mentality that we have in the United States and in California in particular. Now, that basically says that we should be focusing more on vocational skills, and our students are not really being told anything about that, and they're not really being prepared for that. So that's one of the biggest takeaways I got from this is, look, there is some evidence that going to college might hurt you when automation comes, and you might be better off when or having a vocational degree instead. So we're going to take a look at how we can maybe adapt to that in a little bit. So one of the other things that I saw from Bjornjolfsson and Mitchell article on machine learning is there's going to still be a need for interpersonal skills for certain tasks. They write, however, the more unstructured a task of interacting with other doctors and potentially emotionally fraught task of communicating with and comforting patients are much less suitable for machine learning approaches, at least as they exist today. So this is one of the things that is really relevant is interpersonal skills are going to still be really important. Now, think about the modern education system. How much time are we spending on interpersonal skills? How to do proper introductions, how to write like letters and formal letters, how to be professional or act professionally, or even just how to be emotionally stable enough to take care of another person, right? Because that's what a doctor, that's what a nurse needs to do, is they need to be able to comfort other people on top of taking care of them physically. It's not just I'm looking at your body like it's a machine and I just need to fix it. There's also a person in that machine that needs to be taken care of. So are we spending time in learning those skills or teaching those skills to our students? I haven't seen a whole lot of that. And that might be one skill that's really important in the school of tomorrow. All right. So you can also think about other jobs that require those interpersonal skills. So anytime you have to work with the elderly or children, those jobs are not going to be replaced by artificial intelligence or a robot because there's something in communicating with another person that doesn't exist when you're interacting with the computer. And you can kind of see it when you even try to have a conversation with ChatGPT, or when you try to call customer service and you get like, some pre-recorded thing that kind of guides you through finding where you need to be. It's just not the same as talking to an actual person. And so one of the other places that interpersonal skills is going to be important is going to be with scientists and entrepreneurs, right? If you're a scientist, you're out there in the frontiers of trying to discover new things. Now, interpersonal skills are going to be really important as a scientist, because it's not good that you discover something new, but you can't communicate it to anyone else, or that people don't really like you enough to listen to you, right? So interpersonal skills are still going to be important if you're going to be a scientist. It's still going to be important. It's really important if you're an entrepreneur, because you're trying to make a lot of connections with people on the outside that can help you benefit mutually. And it's going to be important for other people that are just professional communicators, like journalists. So these communication skills are vital to the future. So how much time are we spending in developing those in a high quality manner? Now, one of the things that is also going to be important is students need to know what their purpose in the world is going to be, especially in this new futurized world. Now, one of the problems that I have with the modern education system is that because we have such a focus on getting kids into college, they have no connection to what jobs actually feel like or actually are. If you've ever worked, right, or worked in a bunch of different places, like I have, I've done everything from sell knives to, to tutor and teach. And one of the things that I find is that when there's a huge difference between a job description and actually doing a job. And you don't really find that out until you enter in that job. I had a friend of mine ask me to go help him working for a, how can I put it? It's like an environmental firm. So they did a lot of groundwater monitoring, right? They made groundwater monitoring wells. And the way it was sold to me as like, oh, you get to travel. It's like, you write up some reports. You get, you get to leave the office about once a month. But when you actually get there, I found that most of my time was being spent in a cubicle, writing reports. About once a month, I would go out into the field. But when I go out into the field, because this is an environmental company, you have to go to where there are environmental disasters, which I didn't think about. And so I was visiting a bunch of places that had like the most polluted groundwater or had lead paint everywhere. And so I found that was like my first big exposure to like, oh, the job description and how it actually feels going there are two very, very different things. And students, young people, need to realize this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they need to know what the actual work, like jobs that they're interested in, are like. And if they go and they try an internship somewhere and they find that they don't like it, then you have to have a debriefing with them and ask them like, all right, well, what specifically didn't you like? And what specifically did you like, so that you can pivot into a direction that's going to be more suitable to you. And the key is find your purpose. So how do you find purpose? Here's a good way of finding purpose is you go out into the world and you try to find a problem that you want to help solve. You may not be able to solve it all on your own, but you can contribute to the solving of that problem. That's how you develop purpose in people, is you try to go out and expose them to a bunch of different problems, and then they themselves have to select what problem calls to them. That's what it means to find your calling, right? Is to see a problem and then to want to go and fix that problem. Like for me, The problem that I'm trying to solve is this problem of public education, right? There's a lot of things that are wrong with it, but I need to go, and that's what motivates me to try and study, to learn more, to reach out to other people, and to identify what the problem is and what are the possible solutions. And there's a school called Acton Academy that actually pushes their students as young as 11 to go out and find internships over the summer. Like that's a part of their program. It's like, look, 3/4 of the year, you're getting ready. And then that last quarter of the year, you're going out and you're trying to find an internship so that you can grow yourself as a person. So you can start to identify what the problems are that exist out there and find what your calling is. So finding your calling is also a product of, interacting with the world that's out there around you. Now, if I think back at my student, Steven, his biggest problem was that there was no purpose and there was no way for public school to give him purpose. That's a big problem. He had no way of exploring out into the real world. Now, some people are going to say, oh, you can do that as a teacher by, like showing them videos of jobs or by inviting people over to like talk about their jobs. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the same as going out and experiencing it yourself, of going out and exploring the world. And that's an important aspect that's missing. So if I were to design a school of the future, that would be something that I would try and include, and you can see that people as young as 11 can start doing this. So maybe in middle school, we should start encouraging our students to go out and find internships, even if it's just them shadowing somebody. Each year that they do that, they learn valuable information about themselves. They learn about what they don't like, what they like, and they can identify a problem that's going to give their life purpose. And that's what's going to help a person flourish, right? My problem with education is that it's got all of these outcomes that it wants for students. Like it knows what's good for the students, right? And as an individual, as a person, the only person that really knows what's good for me is me, right? Not the world, not everyone else that's trying to push me into college or push me into whatever. And that's true for the students, right? Like the students need to identify what they need, and they need exposure to the world to do that. All right. And so this has been episode 31, Rethinking Education Part 1. Thank you for listening to the Less is More Education podcast. If you would like to support the podcast at the cost of less than one coffee a month, visit patreon.com/less is more education. If you prefer reading about the research most relevant to pedagogy and education policy, please visit lessismoreeducation.substack.com. Thank you very much for listening.